Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Sarah Panik, and I'm an Education USA advisor at the US-UK Fulbright Commission. And today's topic is a pre-departure webinar for students who are headed to the US for their undergraduate studies. And so this session is specifically for students who have already applied and been admitted to a US university and basically have their visa in hand or have applied for their visa, and they are departing for the US in the coming weeks or months. If you are joining us today and you have not yet applied for US study, you of course are very welcome to stick around and listen for the information, but you may also want to take a look at some of our other events and webinars that are available on our website. We have a Study in the US webinar coming up at the beginning of September. We have a USA College Day Fair happening at the end of September. So if you haven't yet applied for US study, then you may wish to check out some of those other resources as well. But for those of you that are tuning in, that are headed to the US this autumn, this session is going to be about how to make the most of your experience, and we'll include some top tips to set yourself up for success. And we will be joined by a student speaker who is going to be sharing her own experience of studying in the US. And at the end, we will have time for a Q&A. So at the end, you'll be able to put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. I do ask that you hold any of those questions until the end, just because it might very well be that myself and the student speaker answer those questions as we go. And just to let you know, the session is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. So if you're not able to stay for the whole session or something happens to your internet, know that you'll be able to catch up on the recording on YouTube, and I'll be sending that out to everybody who's registered for this session. Also be aware that we've got an optional session at the end of this webinar where we'll give you the opportunity to come up on screen and introduce yourself to the other students and to the speakers giving the presentation, and ask any other questions in a more informal setting that maybe haven't been answered during the formal webinar. So I'll provide more details about that at the end. All right, so without further ado, I'll get started. And just to tell you a little bit more about who we are at Fulbright and what we do with Education USA. So the US-UK Fulbright Commission was established more than 70 years ago by a man named Senator Fulbright in the aftermath of World War II. And Senator Fulbright himself actually studied in the UK as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, and he thought that the best way to promote peace would be to encourage cultural and educational exchange. So we are a not-for-profit organization that's jointly funded by both the US and the UK government to do just that, to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. And we do that in a variety of different ways. One way that we do that is by offering scholarships at the postgraduate level for study and research in both the US and the UK. And then we also offer an advisory service to assist students, parents, and advisors with applying for US universities. And this advisory service is part of the Education USA network, which is a US Department of State network of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world. And our aim as Education USA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to help UK students study in the US. And we're actually the only official source of US study here in the UK. So as I mentioned, today we'll be talking about planning for success at your US institution. And so at this time, I'd like to invite our student speaker, Rebecca, to come on stage and introduce herself, as she's going to be contributing throughout this presentation to share her own perspective.
Hi everyone, it's great to be with you. My name is Rebecca, and I just graduated recently in May 2022 from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm excited to share my experiences there with you today.
Thanks, Rebecca, and we're excited to hear about those experiences. And so first and foremost, I just want to make you aware that on our website, we have a plethora of pre-departure information. If you go to our website, fulbright.org.uk, and you go to the Going to the US tab, and then you scroll down to the pre-departure tab, I'll show you some screenshots of this at the end. You'll see that we've got information on travel, academics, living arrangements, campus life, US culture. And so I definitely recommend that you check that out. And in today's presentation, we're going to focus on some things that you can do now and also when you arrive on campus to help set yourself up for success, to enable you to make the most of your experience in the US. And so first I wanted to talk a little bit about your arrival in the US and just do a quick note on visas. Unfortunately, we're unable to give out any kind of visa advice. The US Embassy in the UK is going to be your best resource for anything related to visas. That being said, we did host a webinar at the end of June with the consular team at the US Embassy in the UK. And we've got a recording of that webinar on the pre-departure page of our website. So I definitely recommend checking that out. If I would imagine that most of you tuning in have already applied for your visa, but if for some reason you haven't applied yet for your visa, you can check out that resource there. And the US Embassy website also has a whole visa FAQs page, and they have a contact page where you can contact them if your question isn't answered anywhere else on their website. The other thing to be aware of with your arrival in the US is just making sure that you're following any of the COVID requirements of your university and for entering the US. I imagine at this point in time, your university will already have been in touch about any of the requirements related to COVID, whether there's any kind of vaccination requirements or whether there's any requirements to be tested. And so do make sure that you are aware of what those requirements are and make sure that you're meeting those requirements before you go. And I really want to encourage you when you get to the US to take part in your international student orientation. A lot of universities are going to offer this for international students. Some of them might even offer it virtually before you arrive, but many of them will have it in person on campus. This is a really great resource to get to know other students and start to get familiar with campus and the surrounding area. Oftentimes they might help you get set up with your student ID. Sometimes they help international students get set up with a bank account or a phone plan or a SIM card. And something to be aware of is that both banks and phone plans and SIM cards are very location specific in the US. So depending on where you are, it could be that a certain bank is better or a certain phone company, phone provider is better. And so it's best to figure out which ones are going to be good for your location. And that's something that they might help you do at International Student Orientation, or if they don't, that you could at least ask about while you're there. Another good thing about International Student Orientation is that if you're living on campus, you might have the chance to move into your room early, and they might even help arrange trips to your local Target or Walmart, which are kind of big stores where you can buy lots of different things in the US to buy things, and you can go there maybe to buy things like bedding and essentials. Something to be aware of when it comes to student housing is that it can be really different in the US compared to the UK. It's very possible that you're going to have a roommate, and some of you might already be in contact with your roommate in the US. You might very well have shared bathrooms, and this is something that I'm sure that Rebecca can share some of her experiences on. If not now, then if you have any questions about it in the Q&A. But at this point, Rebecca, do you have anything that you want to share either about international student orientation or housing or anything that we've just talked about?
Yeah, definitely. I would echo for you all to do make the most of international orientation. I know it probably might not feel like the most fun thing to do right before you start university to kind of go to some mini lectures about university, but for me, there were some really helpful sessions just on information around the university, things like the healthcare system and where to go and what to do if you're sick, which is unfamiliar to most of us from the UK, I think, in the US system. I was also able to meet people, international advisors who would be a great resource for all 4 years, and to meet and build community with other international students who then became, friends or just people I would see in a friendly face around campus for 4 years. For me, I found that international orientation time to be a great time to explore the campus and just take walks around, find where my classes were going to be, and settle in while things were a bit quieter. If you are in residence halls, take the time to unpack your things, explore the hall, find which shower is best in the shared bathrooms. Just kind of settle in before the US students arrive. Because I found that US moving day to be quite a big event. So do prepare for that to be perhaps a little bit overwhelming and prepare for that, but equally try to enjoy it, meeting your roommate and people on your floor or in your hall. You could even, plan trips with them to go and get bedding or help you with a bank account or a phone plan, as they likely will know more about that. Yeah, no, my international orientation had some really fun events. We even had a scavenger hunt around campus, where we would go and meet different people at different locations or different buildings, and they would give out little bits of merch. And we had like a welcome barbecue on the last night, which was a nice like little celebration, and just like made me feel at home.
Thanks, Rebecca. You're making me want to take part in an international student orientation myself. It sounds like fun. Great. So moving right along, I also want to encourage you to do some research, both before you get on campus and also once you arrive on campus, to see all the different resources that are available at your institution. Most universities are going to have some type of international student office. So figure out where that is, what they do, what types of services they offer. Is it something where it's worth going in person and introducing yourself, trying to understand the different things that might be available to you through that. It's also a good idea to seek out what types of mental health resources are available on campus, especially in recent years. Universities have really prioritized mental health of their students, and most universities will include some form of counseling included as part of their health fees on campus, at least some of the initial counseling services for students who might only need a few sessions. And then they also offer referral services for students who might need more long-term counseling as well. So be aware of where this is in case that's something that you think that you might be wanting to use at any point in time. Or even if you're not sure if you want to use it at any point in time, being aware of it in case you decide you do need it later down the road is a good idea. Be aware that universities do want to support their students. And so there are a lot of different services that exist. And it's often just a matter of realizing that they're there. And so do kind of just try and get a sense of what all those different services are and try to keep them in mind for if and when you need to use them at any point during your studies. Another thing that you could do in advance is see if there's any students that you can connect up with. Maybe there's other students from the UK at your university or other international students, and you may that are either on campus already or that are starting at the same time as you or that have been there for a couple of years already, and they might be able to provide some useful information and advice as a fellow student from the UK who knows what it's like to be coming from the UK and going to the US for university. I'm also going to encourage you to get involved on your US campus. I imagine that a lot of you, one of the top reasons for going to the US is this opportunity for extracurricular involvement. Because while I know, of course, here in the UK at university, you can take parts in clubs and societies, I really do feel that in the US, they take extracurricular activities to a whole other level. And this, again, has to do with how education in the US is about educating you as a whole person. So it's not just about educating you in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. So there are going to be a plethora of ways to get involved. And most universities are going to have some type of student activity fair that's being held at the beginning of the term. So do go along to that and see about all the different things that they've got that you might be interested in. And then if there is something that you see that's missing and that you want to start, then be aware that you can look into ways of how to do that. And that's definitely common for students to do this as well. And I'd love to hear from Rebecca about any of her experiences on this.
Yeah, definitely. The activities fair definitely took place at my university and was a lot of fun. And so many students would descend on that every year, and it's a great opportunity to get to know everything that's going on there. I definitely put my name down for things at the activities fair that I never even ended up getting involved in, but it was great to know like the breadth of what was available and get to talk to people about what they were doing. Something I was really excited to get involved in and that was big at my university was like nonprofit work and kind of community service. So I definitely did a lot of that. I got to work with like local high school students on their university applications actually. I worked with refugee communities around in Atlanta teaching English, and made really good friends at my university through doing that. There were obviously a lot more kind of traditionally very fun things to do beyond that. So societies, student political councils, event planning, sports, things like that, as you can see on the screen. One of my best friends was on our ultimate frisbee team for 4 years, and it was definitely a highlight of her college career. So think about some new things that you might want to kind of get to do and go along and try them out, I think would be my advice. I definitely agree that social life is on campus more than necessarily in the UK. I think maybe would be more just in the city that you're in. So sports games, we had outdoor movie nights, concerts, a farmer's market, food trucks, whatever it is. Campus life, I think, will really make your experience what it is. So have fun, do things with friends, find out what there is to do and do it.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'd also like to encourage you to be open-minded. The US offers a lot of flexibility, which again is probably one of the top reasons that you're headed there for your studies. And you're very likely going to have the chance to take a class on a topic that you never would have expected before. And students find out a lot of surprising things about themselves and about these subjects when they take these classes. Another thing to be aware of is that classes might seem very different in the US than in the UK. In the US, you can typically expect regular testing, more regular homework. Class participation is often part of your grade. And so that's quite different from probably what you're used to in the UK and what you would do at a UK university, where it tends to be more based on large pieces of coursework or larger exams that happen fewer times throughout the year. So these are just things to be aware of and be prepared for as you're adjusting to your studies. Rebecca, would you be willing to speak a little bit about your experience with this?
Yeah, so the freedom to kind of explore and I guess be open-minded was one of the main reasons I wanted to apply to the US. And that might be the same for some of you watching. So do try your best to do that. I went into university as a biology major and I ended up with a degree in neuroscience and Spanish. So part of me didn't drift too far and a lot of me really did. What was really helpful for me was to like look through the course atlas and course directory and find things that were exciting and ask older students for recommendations as well, for courses and for professors maybe. Some of my favorite classes ended up being in sociology, English, anthropology, linguistics too. And those really like opened my mind to interests I genuinely didn't really know I had. And I feel like I gained a really well-rounded education that I was able to tailor to what I really was interested in and how that changed through university. So for example, to combine the interests that I ended up in with like STEM and languages, I took a course on like healthcare in Latin America, language of migration, things like that. I even looked into a primatology course in my last semester. I think it can feel a little bit overwhelming to have so many options and to feel responsible for planning your own schedule and figuring out which classes to take when. But I know that there were academic advisors available at my university who are on hand to help with that. And you will make it to the end, even if in your first year it feels like there's so much to do. In terms of course style, definitely do expect that grading will be different and the classes will look different. And my biggest advice would be to be aware of that as early as you can be in the semester. So you will likely get a syllabus for each class you're taking, which will be like 10 pages of just information about the class. And somewhere in there will be like how it's graded. So like 20% this test, 20% this essay, things like that. So read your syllabus, find out if attendance is graded, if you'll have weekly quizzes, so you have to be there every Friday. You might have a combination of different things in different classes. And that can be an adjustment, but know that you'll get better at it with practice, the more that you get into that. So while it might feel like a lot of work in first year, in the end, you'll benefit from feeling engaged and knowing what's going on in your classes. And at the end of the semester, those exams won't be so bad when they're only 20% of your grade. I definitely had to get into the habit of reading every day, expecting to be completing some kind of homework most days. But once you're able to understand that and fit that around your schedule and plan time to do it with friends, like in your dorm after everyone gets back from class, it feels very normal.
I think that's really useful advice. Thank you, Rebecca. I know for me, when I first moved to the UK and learned about the exam system or the large pieces of coursework system here, I was shocked because I was so used to coming from the US and having work happen little by little all the way through. I think I would have really struggled here in the UK system. And I hear from a lot of students that they really do enjoy the system in the US. Although for other students who maybe are used to that UK system, sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle to get used to it. So I think that the advice that you've given is really good advice. As you're getting acclimated to life in the US, I also want to encourage you to reach out for support when you need it. This is, again, where maybe you've established some connections with the International Student Office, and maybe they're going to be a resource for you. If you're living in student housing, you're likely to have an RA, a resident assistant, who's there to support students within the dorms, and that might be a person that you can go to. You can also seek out any counseling services if you need to. And then also from an academic standpoint, there's all sorts of different resources that are available. Most universities are going to have some type of writing center. So especially if you're a student who's maybe been really focused on the maths and sciences in recent years and maybe hasn't had to do quite as much writing and you're wondering how you're going to be doing all of these essays at a US university, you might find that the writing center is for you. Or even if you are more familiar with writing and you just want some extra help, the writing center could be a good resource. If you're somebody who's studying a language, you might find that your university has a language learning center. I know my university offered free tutoring for students who were taking language classes, as well as the use of other resources. There's also something really unique in the US in that professors are going to hold regular office hours. And so that's something that I would also encourage you to make use of. It can be a really useful way to kind of connect up with professors and ask them questions about things that you're confused about, that you might need extra help with. It can also be a really good way to just kind of establish professional networking contacts. And professors are so eager to help you, and they really do enjoy speaking with students, that I would really encourage you to make use of this. And I hear from students time and time again, and perhaps Rebecca in a moment is going to share about some of her experiences with this. But I also just want to make sure that if you do need help, don't be afraid to keep asking for help until you get what you're looking for. As I said, a lot of universities have so many different services, and so it might take a little bit of time to find the right place that's going to support you. But if the first like one or two places that you try aren't able to help you with what you're looking for, just kind of keep trying until somebody is able to help you, because somebody there will be able to support you with what you're looking for. So Rebecca, I don't know if you have anything to share with any of that, whether about office hours with professors or anything that I've just talked about.
Yeah, I can speak to a lot of that. I think in terms of office hours, the idea that you can just like walk into your professor's office and start talking with them can feel a little bit strange. But culturally, it's very normal, and your professors really are, for the most part, really eager to work with students and get to talk with you. That's literally what their office hours are. They're not, working on anything else while they're during those times that they've advertised, they're there for students to come talk to them. So for me, it was a great way to get to know professors, get more information about things I was interested in, get help when I needed it. I remember being so nervous to go and see a sociology professor in my first semester at Emory because I'd never taken sociology before. It wasn't exactly sure how to work on like the first essay that we were given. And I'd also been told, like, go to office hours, go talk to a professor. And I was like, how do I do this? So it did feel weird. I didn't really know how to interact, but it gets better. That professor actually didn't realize I was from the UK and then encouraged me to speak up more in class because I had interesting perspectives as an international student in a sociology class. So that was really encouraging for me. Later on, I had a Spanish professor who I took a class with and began to chat with kind of more consistently, because I was interested in kind of what she was doing. I wasn't taking classes with her for most of the semesters, but we would still catch up. I would go to her office, and she ended up being an advisor for me for like lots of things. Again, like I was able to build a connection with her when I didn't really feel like I was making an effort to network. Ended up going to her house for coffee over Thanksgiving last year. So maybe you'll even build connections like those. But it's great to have people that you can go back to, you know, for references if you need them or for help if you need it. And definitely in terms of other help that you might need, know that there will be resources there for you because there are so many. But don't wait to find them. Don't feel like you need to have it all figured out on your own. So do ask for help. You might have to advocate for yourself because you're in a new place, in a new space at university, and you're not expected to know everything at the beginning. I also worked as a resident assistant in my junior year of college, and my job there was to take care of first year's well-being, plan events, and to know about campus resources to refer people to. So I used to help my residents like plan their schedules and tell them which professors to take and avoid. But equally could tell them, you know, where to go if they had an issue and needed some kind of help. So if you do have resident assistants and you don't know where else to go, use that resource. They'll be there for you.
Thank you, Rebecca. That's really good advice. And part of the reason that we talk about this in this session is so that you can start seeking out some of these services and be aware of them before you go. Because once you get onto campus, you're just going to be getting so much information and it'll be hard to keep track of it all. And so if you do have time before you go to start doing some of this research and being aware of what exists, or even once you get on campus and they share that information, at least it will be there somewhere in your brain so that if and when you do end up needing to use these resources, that you know that they exist and it makes it just a little bit easier. But it's also good to know that if you either can't remember or you haven't had a chance to seek out these resources, that there are going to be people like your resident assistants or even your professors are going to be able to help refer you to resources on campus if you're needing help with anything, either academically or in your personal life as well. They can often help if you're struggling with anything to point you into the relevant resources on campus. Going along with that, I want to talk a little bit about health and well-being. And again, I'm going to encourage you here to seek out resources that are available as soon as you arrive on campus so that you're aware of what exists in case you need to use them. Some universities are going to have a health center available on campus for you to use if you need to access it. So be aware of where that is and what the hours are and how to access it should you need it. You're all going to have some form of health insurance that's required for you to be a student at a US university. So you've either purchased that through the university or you've purchased it separately. I'm going to really encourage you to read through your policy in advance and understand what is covered in your policy and what is not covered in your policy and what any kind of associated costs there are with your policy. Just because you have insurance, it doesn't mean that healthcare is free. It doesn't really quite work in a similar way to the NHS. Typically, even with insurance, every time that you visit the doctor, you might have some type of payment that you have to make, what's called a copay. And so even just kind of a normal checkup with a doctor, there might be some type of copay associated depending on what type of insurance you have. And so I'd really encourage you to kind of be reading through things in advance and being aware of what your policy includes. The other thing to be aware of is similar to the UK, you can always, if you've got something that's like really minor and you just have like a sore throat or your ear's a bit clogged and you just want like a little bit of advice, you might be able to go to a pharmacist in the first instance and just see what they have to say. And if they've got any kind of over-the-counter medicine that they might be able to recommend that you use. Or if you describe your symptoms to them and they say, actually, you need to go see a doctor, then at least you know that that's probably what you should do. So I would really encourage you to do that as well. And I'd also encourage you to establish balance as best as you can. This is something that's going to be tricky. This is something that's tricky in all of our lives on a regular basis. And you know, as a student who's just completed your A levels or your other exams and is headed to the US, this is something you probably already experienced, is needing to establish balance. And especially when you're off to university and when you're going to university in another country in the US, this is going to be important. You can expect that there's going to be lots of ups and downs, and know that this is normal. Especially when you get to the US, there may be some form of culture shock. A lot of times students from the UK think, okay, well, I'm going to the US, we kind of speak the same language, right? Although you'll be surprised in some of the terminology where somebody in the US is going to say something to you and you're going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I hear you speaking words in English, but I don't know what that means. And similarly, you might say something to somebody in the US and they're like, what are you talking about? And so you'll soon learn these, and it will become probably fun stories amongst you and your friends. But also know that it is typical to have a honeymoon period where things are really exciting and new at first, followed by some type of dip where maybe you're just feeling really homesick and all you want is a good cup of tea and a digestive biscuit. And why is it so hard to get these things in the US? And then you will readjust. And it's completely normal to feel all sorts of different things. So just being aware of that, and knowing that going in can sometimes be helpful for students, so that when they are experiencing those feelings, they're like, okay, this maybe isn't what I want to be feeling right now, but I am acknowledging that this is normal, and I have all of these different resources and supports to help me should I need it. Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything on this that you wanted to share from your own experience.
Yeah, I can say a little bit. I think in terms of culture shock at the beginning, this will come in waves and it might not kind of be over when you think it is, or it might not happen when you think it might. And it might be frustrating coming up against things for the first time, you know, a year or 2 years into being in the US even, and still figuring out how things work. I remember struggling with things like just getting used to, you know, the location around me and what everything was called. And then later on, things like, where am I going to put my things to store them over the summer? Do I need to do taxes? Like all those kind of questions that nobody can really tell you the answer to necessarily super easily. And it's okay, I think, to be frustrated by those. You don't always have to find the positives, but also don't dwell on those struggles for too long. I think I'd gained lots of resilience and a great support system by reaching out to friends or to other people at university to help me. There's definitely a lot to take in. You're not just learning university material, you're also learning all these new things about the US. And it's amazing to explore and make the most of everything you get the opportunity to do. And be on the go all the time. But for me, I feel like the US is kind of always awake. University is definitely always awake. So it's okay and necessary to take breaks, spend time alone, lean on your friends and family, call them and involve them in your experiences. Just because they might not be having the same ones doesn't mean that they won't be able to help support you in yours. And I guess word of advice, the public supermarket closest to me had a tiny little British section. So if you are missing, you know, particular food, you might be able to find it. So yeah, don't feel like you have to have it all figured out all the time, and you're welcome to kind of lean onto home comforts when you need to.
Thanks, Rebecca. Again, I think that that's really good advice. And lastly, I just want to encourage you to make sure that you take the time to enjoy the adventure. It's going to be a really fun time. You're likely going to be working really hard when you're in the US and going to university there, but you're also going to have a lot of fun, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities to take part in all sorts of different things that you may have not even pictured or imagined before heading there. So we do hope that you enjoy. I am sadly many years out of university now, and I know Rebecca has just finished her studies in the US. So I think that we can both probably express a form of maybe not jealousy, but excitement at least at all of you that are heading out to begin your journeys and have this all ahead of you. So please do enjoy. And I also just want to let you know some more ways that we can help. So in addition to this webinar, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, our website, Fulbright.org.uk, has a whole pre-departure section under this Going to the USA. So you'll see Going to the USA and then go down here to pre-departure. And that's where we've got lots of useful information there. So definitely check that out. The website can also be a really useful resource down the line if you decide that you love the US so much that you are interested in postgraduate study in the US. So you can always come back and visit us then. Although because you're going to be at a US university, you might find that you've actually got resources on your own campus there in the US to support you with applying to graduate studies in the US as well. And if there are any questions that you have in the next couple of weeks before you head off to the US that you forget to ask now or that you'd like answered, we do take questions by email at advising@fulbright.org.uk, or you can go ahead and sign up for a video call with us on our website by going to the contact page on our website and scrolling all the way to the bottom and signing up for a video call there. So with that, I'd love to open it up to the Q&A section now. So if you do have any questions for either Rebecca or myself, you're welcome to put those into the Q&A box now. I do ask that you keep questions quite general that might be helpful to the whole group. If you do have any very specific questions that you'd like answered, that might be a good way to reach out, might be by emailing us at advising@fulbright.org.uk or by signing up for a video call. And I'll just stop sharing my screen so that Rebecca and I can come up. And I'll give you a moment to ask any questions. One question for you, Rebecca. Did you have any initial homesick moments? And if so, how did you handle them?
Yeah, I think I did, not necessarily right at the beginning because I was so wrapped up in everything that was happening. But once things settled down a little bit more, that maybe hit me a little bit. What helped me was staying in touch with family and friends, but in kind of a balanced way. So I didn't kind of call home every day because I felt like that might make it worse, or call home when I was upset, because for me, I don't think that would have helped. Maybe for some other people it would, but calling home regularly, and maybe a little bit more when I was struggling, and also just like trying to push myself a little bit to spend time with friends and not kind of hide out on my own, feeling sorry for myself. I think it helps to just connect with other people, and likely like a lot of students in the US are probably feeling it too, because they might be far from home, just across the US or something, and that will be new for them. So something to bond over, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point, that a lot of students are going to, like, university is going to be new for everybody, even if they haven't come from another country. And that depending on where you're going in the US, it might be that a lot of students are coming from other parts of the US. And so that's something that's good to keep in mind. Can you share a little bit about your experience living in the dorms and dining on campus?
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment to live in dorms and have a roommate. I actually lived in a suite style my first semester, or my first year. So I kind of had 3 roommates and a shared bathroom, but also like a whole floor of students. While it is quite loud to live in big dorms and stuff, it was really fun for first year, and I met a lot of my kind of core best friends that I had through first year on my floor or in my building, because there were different events, and then after that you just can spend time in each other's rooms because you're all just a few feet away from each other. So it can definitely be an adjustment if you've not shared a room with someone before, to share a room with a roommate. So sometimes you might have to set boundaries or expectations if you're not the best friends ever, but that's okay too. You don't have to be best friends with your roommate, and sometimes that works better. and I moved back to dorms as a third year to be an RA, so it definitely wasn't that bad. Dining on campus was a great experience for me. The food was not as bad as anybody kind of said about university. And for my school, our first year, we had like an unlimited dining plan, just to kind of make sure we were eating, I think. So you could just stop in to like one of the cafes or dining centers whenever you wanted to and pick up like something small if you didn't have time for a full meal. But I think food is a great like social event regardless. So a lot of people from the dorms would go kind of together, or you just bump into people there. And that can be a fun way to just sit and chat and meet people for sure.
Great, thank you. Another question that we've got, do you have any budget advice or anything to be aware of as a Brit, such as sales tax or tipping in the US?
Yeah, both of those things take a while to get used to. Sales tax in particularly, because I would go around the store and like try to add up how much things were in my head, and you can't really do that because it's not going to be exactly the same price when you check out, but you do get used to it. I think just in terms of budgeting, it's helpful to understand how much money you have at the start of the semester, and plan out kind of how much you think you'll be spending on things like, you know, food in addition to your meal plan, or, you know, going out and exploring and things like that. And I don't know, any other cost there might be. And just kind of at the beginning have awareness of it, so you don't get yourself kind of into too much trouble, or without money. There's definitely like different apps and things you can use and connect your bank account to kind of do that a little bit more strictly, which might work. I definitely did that for a while. But yeah, I think just getting used to checking your money maybe more than you have done before, since now you're more kind of independent, will be helpful.
And you've touched on this a little bit already, but how did you meet friends when you were at university, or how do you recommend that students meet people?
Mm-hmm. So at the beginning, I actually met some friends like in international orientation, so that was nice. And they weren't necessarily my best friends all 4 years of university, but definitely like I still would catch up with them when I would see them around campus. So those were nice, like friendly faces to have. Most of my best friends in my first and second year I met in housing on my floor of my residence hall, and I think that was quite common. So there were different, you know, orientation kind of first week of university events where we would go and just get talking to people and like make plans with them to do whatever thing they're doing, since you're kind of doing the same things of getting used to university. Being in classes with the same people in my first semester was a good way to meet people and do homework together. And then another way kind of through my later years of university was through extracurriculars, because there I really found people that were more engaged the same way as in my classes, but engaged in the things that I was really interested in, and often were like a lot more similar to me in certain ways. So yeah, I think kind of housing and proximity and kind of classes and events.
Great, thank you. And then those are all the questions that we've got in the Q&A box for now. So I also just want to ask you if there's anything that we haven't asked you that we wish we had, if you have any kind of last bits of wisdom that you'd like to impart. And it's okay if not, but just like to double check.
Let me see. I think one random piece of wisdom based on budgeting is continue to check flight prices throughout the year and see if you're planning to come home, what your best options are. It's great to always have that in your head, but otherwise, really do enjoy it. I just finished my time there and I miss it so much. So make the most of if you get invited to go visit places, or go do things. Do make the most of those opportunities as much as you can.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your experiences and to answer questions. I know that students are going to find it or have found it very useful. So thank you so much for that time. And I just want to remind you all that this session has been recorded. And so if you ended up joining a bit late and didn't get to catch all of it, or for those who maybe have already dropped off, I will be sending out the recording sometime next week to everybody who's registered. So do feel free to check that out. And then I'm also going to talk in just a moment about the optional session that's going to be happening after this. So I'll just thank you all again for tuning in, and I'll just stop the recording and then I'll talk to all of you about the optional session.